Hello there! Recently I made a project at school on which I used some recycled materials, and a lot of my friends asked how I made this exact texture. So today I'm going to show you how to make this kind of recycled looking textures using Blender and procedural shading. So basically today we are going to recreate this kind of texture and make it slightly different and see how to touch the settings to make it customizable. So let's see the steps that we're going to go through. The first one is going to be having some reference. So as you can see, we are going to use this as a displacement reference, this as a texture, etc. We're going to break it down into simple steps. So the first one is going to be displacement. As you can see, it's rather simple. It's going to be a Voronoi texture with some cracks, adding some depth to the Voronoi and some little glimpses of stuff popping out. Then the base color, we will see what we'll do. It's a very generative process, so we can do whatever we want with that. So yeah, we're going to have a Musgrave, we'll have a milky, like diluted looking thing, and then having the grain and mixing all of that together. And yeah, that's going to be it. Very easy.
Here we go again.
I'm going to add an icosphere just so we can subdivide it a lot, 5 subdivisions, and on top of that have a subdivision surface modifier set to like 5. By default I have a sky. I'm going to use an HDR instead. Obviously I'm in cycles because we're going to use a lot of displacement. I'm going to go to the material tab here and go into the settings of the material, and I want the displacement to be displacement only, and that's going to allow us to plug a displacement node directly in here. So here, as you can see, the white outline is the geometry itself. So if we go back to object, and this node is pushing the geometry inwards, and basically we're going to plug some things into here, like some textures and stuff. What I want to make here for the displacement, this kind of pattern, we're going to see that this is a Voronoi. First step, we're going to add a Voronoi texture. So if we check what's going on here, also first I want to switch the mapping from general to object, because that way it's using the object's coordinate, which is easier to understand, and there is no stretching and stuff using this. So this is good. So as you can see, we have a Voronoi texture, and if we plug that directly into this, we'll see that we have a displacement going on. And I'm going to disable this so that we don't see the outlines of stuff. If I change the scale to something more digestible, we'll see that we have our displacement going on already, which is good. But notice that on our reference, we want this to be going outwards, and now it's going inwards. So what it's saying is when it's black, you want to go inwards, and when it's white, you want to go outwards. So we're going to use a curve to dictate how this should behave. So first, to show you, if I just invert this, it's going to do what we want, but we are going to have these points at some points.
Baba Bowie.
Sorry for the twist of tongue here.
Bowie.
So I'm going to use a curve instead, so RGB curves. And first I'm going to invert here directly. So we see that's doing the exact same as invert. But then to avoid those pointiness,
Bowie.
and I want a fall off. If I take a point here and bring it here, we have a much more interesting fall off here. Also, I'm keeping this tutorial a bit more slow pace. First of all, it's easier to edit, and second of all, maybe it's more enjoyable for you as a learner if you see all the steps, all the mistakes I can also make during this process. Okay, so now what we have is a Voronoi texture that we can change the scale of. We can change the profile of the bumps, and we can change the scale of this. Now what we can do is simply duplicate this and have one value dictate the scale for both, because we're going to use a different mode of Voronoi here. Instead of F1, you want distance to edge, and let me show you what this does. This Voronoi, yes, I need to put the vector coordinates here. So this Voronoi has bumps and stuff, and this one is saying you take the distance to those cell edges. So these are the cells and these are the cell edges, and we're going to be able to use a color ramp and crush this so we have only like black lines. And what we're going to do now is say, before that displacement, I want you to mix those. So we're going to use a math node, because these are just values between 0 and 1, and I want you to multiply them. I want this to be less harsh, so I'm adding some value here so that the black is not that black, and I can have like 0.8 or something. So now we are 0.8 here and 1 here because we used the clamp. Now when we multiply here, we have the cells and the line between those cells, and now when we plug this into the displacement, we have a distinct separation between all of the different cells. And the reason we're seeing those is because we need more subdivision. Okay, I'm going to bump those values up like to 6 maybe, and we'll see that the computer is going to start having some trouble. Now we have much more defined edges between all those cells. And now, because this is nice and clean, and I want it to be like recycled, having lived a life a little, I'm going to add some scratches on the surface, just like if it had some impacts or stuff. Add another Voronoi, the distance to edge again, and this one is going to be our cracks. And we're going to distort the vector coming in so that these aren't straight lines. Like these are very straight. Let me put a color ramp already and crush this so that we see the lines more clearly. Okay, so these are very straight lines. Those don't look like scratches or anything remotely natural or random. So I'm going to put a noise texture before. Coordinates or vectors, I would say, are colors. So for example, the object coordinates, each color represents an axis. So we have, if I separate X, Y, Z, you will see clearly, like there is the X, the Y, and the Z that are all gradients and all represented by a color. As you can see, a noise texture is also a color output. We can have a color output that looks a lot like it uses the same colors. First, let me use the object coordinates for these two. Nice. So we can basically mix the vector coming in from here with the color here, and we will see that we have a slider here that tells us, okay, we want to distort that much. As you can see, when I go for to the left, I have the original object coordinate vector, and when I go far to the right, we have the noise texture here. And what we want to do is distort object coordinates just a little bit. And also, as you can see, there is a shift like going from here to there when I do this, and it's because you need to put this as a linear light, and now it doesn't change. Nice. So now we have a slider saying how much we distort this. Let me put it to 0 and go back through this, and we'll see what happens when we move this a little bit. You see now it's getting distorted. I can up the detail level to have more detail distortion. I can change the scale of this. Can do all kind of stuff. The value is very sensitive, so let's put like 0.1. 0.1 is a lot. 0.05, and I think we have a nice texture here. Now we are going to use another noise texture that is going to mask out some of those. So we have only a few areas that have some cracks like this. Once again, object coordinates here. And maybe I want it to be a bit lower, and I want another color ramp here because I want to crunch these so we get only a few areas. And for example here, if I say the whites are going to display those and the darks are going to not display them, we will have only cracks where it's white here. So let me demonstrate it using a mix node again, using this as the factor, this as the first input, and white as the second input. And as you can see, when I have more white than anything, I don't have, like, I almost have no cracks. When I have more dark than anything, almost everything has cracks. Do we want more? Do we want less? We can just choose here. I think this is good. I'm gonna multiply this again here before the displacement. So another multiply here. We're going to do the same trick as the other, because if we plug this directly, we'll have this going on. So the cracks are going to be very sharp, and the rest of the displacement is going to be more smooth. So I'm going to dial down the cracks using the same trick as here with the clamp, and I'm going to put like 0.5 or something. Yes, now we can check for the displacement. So plug the displacement back in and watch it with the principal BSDF. Nice, I think that looks okay. Maybe, just maybe, these are too clean for me right now. I didn't use that trick for the other materials I showed you, but I'm going to use the same as here again. So I want to plug the object coordinate here and here so that I distort it a little bit, and I can plug this here and this here also, and this is going here, and now we have a distorted looking thing. I want the details to be back at 2 so that we don't get much of this. And now this looks a lot more than this reference image, which is cool. It's more natural looking, but this is still too powerful. Maybe I dial down the noise size. Yes, this looks more organic, I would say. Okay, so now we did this. Oh, we forgot this. Okay, I'm going to
Here we go again.
Voronoi texture again, but this time we're not going to use the distance parameter, but we're going to use the color, which is basically each cell separate. First we do the same trick as before, same trick to distort everything. Nice. And I want the scale of this Voronoi pattern to be much higher because we want little dots of this. So let's say 100 something, 100. Okay, and now the distortion is a bit too high. It's really playing around with values when you do procedural shade. And what we want, this is unusable for us right now because it's a color, and what we've been playing around with for now is black and white values. So I'm going to say separate color, put the color into this, and we're going to use one of these, which is now a value from 0 to 1 that we can plug into color ramps and stuff. We're going to use a color ramp and we're going to crush some values. So color ramps, and I'm going to put the black all the way to 0.99, and we are going to see some white values only at some very selected spots. This is like the percentage of how many dots there will be. So if I put, like right now we had 99 here, so we have only 1% of the little dots. And now we're going to this time not multiply but add. So math node again. The dark is 0, the white is 1. Right now this is displacing at a white dot, it would be displacing by 10 centimeters because we did 0.1. So that's too much. So let's just dial it down a little and multiply by, let's say, 0.1. So now it's going to displace only by 1 centimeter. So now we're going to do the color, and you may have guessed that we're going to use the same Voronoi texture, this one, to generate those little dots that we see here. We're going to plug this into another color ramp, and now if I put the color in the base color, we'll see that we get exactly that texture because we didn't touch this yet. And on our reference, like this is mostly white, and some touches have a number of different grains and stuff. So mostly white. So this is white on one side, white on the other. It's all white. I can put this at like 0.9, and the colors are going to be after this. So I can put it here. For example, I put this as a red, and also I could make it constant. So I have this here. The red is going to be at like 0.99. And now we have 99% of the surface that's white and the rest is going to be red. Basically, the position of those will dictate how much of them there will be. And now we have 97% of the surface that's white and the rest is either red, green or blue. You can change this however you want. You can even put some dark color here. You can do whatever you want. This is procedural, so do whatever you want here. We're going to use also a Musgrave texture to add a much more wavy thing. So let's say the white part is rubber or something like this, and this rubber went through a mix of different materials because it's recycled, let's say that, and the mix is a bit rough, so you have it's going to be a mix between a Musgrave and a noise texture. So let me show you what. See, this is a very famous trick. You put a Musgrave and then you use Musgrave as a vector for the noise, and we get this texture. When you mix two liquids together and don't stir them that much, it gets like this kind of texture, and that's what I want to achieve with this. And we can plug this through a color ramp to have a much more contrasted thing here. And now we can mix RGB, those two together. Yes. So now if we look at this, what's going on? And because this is black and white over white, I can say multiply, and now we have the colors almost intact. And I can just drag this to have more or less of this. In the PDF I said we're finished now, but actually we're not, because we're going to use some bumps tricks to make it more realistic. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to use a bump node, so here bump, and we're going to basically just use this as the height. And as you can see, it looks like the grains are going inwards. We want the opposite of that, so invert this. Nice. Now we have the little dots popping out. So now what we see here, for example, now let's, instead of this, let's use a map range from 0 to 1 to 1 to 0. Okay, now if we look at this, we're going to say basically where it's black you stay at 0, and when it's white you put it up, at least in the normal illusion. thing. We go from this, which is colors, to this, which is zeros and ones. It can be read by this. Now I want to add to this industrial feel that we have on these ones, or this one, that if we zoom in on this one, like this, okay, this example is very, very good. And this, maybe we can see it more if we zoom in, but this is like, there's a pattern on top of everything. Like there is this very organic displacement, and on top of it, there is this grid pattern, almost like it's 3D printed. And what I want is to replicate this. So for that, we can use a grid texture. No, it's not called the grid. It's called what? A checker. We can mix this through math, multiply, and plug this right into it, and then crunch this number to a very high value. And this would do the trick. And no, we don't want to multiply. We want to add with a clamp. Have this be greater than, so it's white. Okay, what I did here is these were not perfectly white. Now it's perfectly white because I did a greater than, and let's put like 0.1. So it's almost all white. Now this is black and white again. So 0 and 1. And now I add those two together. I want the white parts to stay very white so that the checker pattern doesn't affect those sprinkles. And now using the clamp thing, it doesn't affect them at all. Now if we look at this from further away and put a bigger scale on that, we can see that it looks like more industrial. I think this is good. What we could do, if you want this to be like 3D printed, just like on this picture, where it looks like layers on top of each other. I don't think this was 3D printed. I think this was molded, but maybe the thing they used as a mold is a 3D print. That would explain those layers. If we wanted to do this, let me show you the trick. Let's put this away and let's use this. Check this out. Separate H, X, Y, Z on this. Yes, perfect. Now we are going to look at the Z because the layers are on the Z axis. Let's use a math node, sine or cosine, whatever. Those two are the same. Well, not the same at all. They are offsetted by, like, what was it? Half of pi, maybe? I don't know. Maybe I'm saying some bullshit. Anyway, and we're going to use a math node before that to multiply this by a lot, so we get those layers. Let's say we want like 500. So this is saying, remember the cosine curve? Yes. So this is a repeating pattern, and by the multiply here, we're basically multiplying the x-axis. So we're crushing the x-axis, so we get this pattern much smaller. Multiplying this before, we're crushing the x-axis, so we get this same pattern but much more. And we're doing all of this on the z-axis anyway. So now we have this 3D printed pattern, which will be generated by a slicer normally. You can plug that straight into here. Nice. Yes, this looks ridiculous because this is huge, but if we crush this number to like 2000, we get a really cool effect. Yes, now we get a cool effect. Last step we can do now is going to be using those and these and those as an ambient occlusion thing. So let's say we want this multiply set to 1, and let's say I plug this into here. You will see what we get. So this is without, this is with, and we get like some relief, some displacement as an illusion. Let's unplug the displacement for us to be able to see that. So this is without the displacement, and we still get those shadows, which is like simulating some ambient occlusion. And we have this slider here to say how much we want of this. Let's now do this to use the cracks now, which was this one, right? Yes. So I plug this one all the way up there, and I want to watch this. Okay, so now we get the cracks, which is cool. Also, you know what? Right before the bump, we can multiply by the cracks, which are, so that here we get the checkerboard, the cracks, and everything. Maybe this is too much. We can dial it down, and maybe this is too much. dial it down a little bit. But I think this is looking cool. And now we plug back the displacement. Yes, wow. What else can we do now? Yes, so the rubber could be very rough, and the rest of those, the sprinkles, can be very not rough, so very reflective. Use this. We had the map range here. We had this, which is perfect. We can plug this into a color ramp, or you know what, a map range. Plug this here into the value, and here we had dark for the rubber and white for the sprinkles of plastic, and here we want the total opposite. So let's plug that into the roughness and see what it does. So here, if we look at the sprinkles, we see that they are very reflective where the rubber is not, and we can change those values because there is nothing with one roughness in nature. Let's put 0.8, and there is nothing with 0 roughness in nature, so let's put 0.2 or something. And now it gives us, yes, this is very noticeable here. But I think we're done here. Maybe the last thing we can need, where we have rubber, I want there to be some map range. Wait, some sprinkles. I want there to be, let's use the same trick here. So here I use the map range again. So white is rubber, black is sprinkles. Where there is rubber, I want some subsurface. Yes, so maybe I go here, I put this here, and this is too much. And also, if we look at the subsurface radius, let's put this to white. So this basically is the one for skin, and by doing this, like the 0.5 here is the red, that is by default. If I put 3 at red, you will see it's all super red. So these are values that if you want a very neutral thing, rubber maybe would go into the blues. I don't know. Which one is the blue? Let's check. No, this one is the red. This one is the green. Last one is going to be the blue. Yes, maybe we put 0.5 here, 0.1 here, and we have a bluish rubber thing going on. And the subsurface would never be like 1. This is extreme. Let's then plug this map range again here, and from 0 to 1 to 1 to, okay, so this I would put this at 0.2 or something. So because it's procedural, you don't have to UV unwrap anything. You can still change all of those values. The color, for example, if I want this to be, wait. This will change everything. Okay, final change, this duplicate here, boom, this goes here. So this one is going to be the color, this one is going to be for everything else. And basically, I just realized that because we had the same for the color and for the roughness, displacement, etc., I wanted to put this as black, but let's see what happens when I do that. Oh shit, now it's reflective everywhere. So it's a very dumb mistake. Shade smooth. But now separating the two, we just have to keep in mind that if you want to change the colors here, like this, I want this to be black. I can have it black and the same roughness as before. This is so cool. And by the way, the subsurface is very strong. So let's put this at 0.1. Yes. So this, now it's okay, because before we had the two linked. So this would have meant very reflective surface, etc. So we don't want that. Now separating the two, we just have to keep in mind, if we want to change the proportions of those colors, we have to change it here too. But that's okay, that's an easy fix. Anyway, I think we're done. Now we're rendering this. While we're rendering this, maybe go back to here and see what we did. So yeah, we replicated this kind of material our own way using those references, and creating our own after this, not using any of those textures, not using any preset, not using anything. We did everything from scratch with the displacement, using Voronoi, cracks, etc., sprinkles and stuff. Then the colors, and yeah, we learned all that in just 1 hour and 40 minutes. I hope the editing won't be too too hard. I'd like to mention that there's a Blender file available on Gumroad with exactly the material that we created. So if you don't want to go through the trouble of recreating it, following the tutorial, etc., there is a link in the video description to Gumroad where the file is available. So yes, and yes, thank you everyone for watching, for sticking around that long, and I hope you enjoyed seeing me struggle to replicate this texture again. But figuring out how to make those textures is really fun, and I encourage you guys to like just pick some references and try to make any textures you see in either in real life or whatever. Anyway, thank you a lot for watching. Please subscribe and like, share, etc. All the nice stuff. And yeah, see you in the next video. Bye.